Alright, another round with Rabbi Shmuel Pollen. I know I'm doing a lot of these. This is turning into another Almondo. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. Either way, it's not going to go on forever, so enjoy it while you can, or ignore it while you have to, depending on your preference. Now, in this video, I'm going to try to sort of speed run the last 4 videos Shmuel made, more or less in response to my original responses. These ones are all pretty short, but there's still a fair amount of stuff here, so we better just get to it.
Hi, this is Rabbi Shmuel Pollen. Welcome back. That's another video for Logicked.
Yeah, it's another one.
I just was so fired up about his video. I had so much to say that I woke up early and made this video. I want to cover a couple more points that I didn't cover before. And at the end, I want to issue a challenge to Logicked, and we'll see if he takes me up on it.
Gee, I wonder what the challenge is going to be. Well, funnily enough, this video is actually part 1 of the video I responded to last time. And I think the reason there's a part 1 and a part 2 is because at some point it just kind of cut off. So really, the challenge was the debate challenge that we saw last time around, and I fairly thoroughly explained the status of that, so that's no longer relevant. But there's still an argument here, so we'll look at that.
Just one of the points that I found interesting is that he said that I should get words like theanine and guanine out of my mouth because I don't believe in science. And I found this particularly audacious, as if atheists have a monopoly on science.
No, atheists don't have a monopoly on science. What I was telling you is that the entire way that you said that you view the pursuit of knowledge is antithetical to science, and the only thing about science you appear to respect are established findings, what you think is proven true now, and not the method by which those findings were made. Because when you look at something that's unknown, you take that as an invitation to just make up an answer and jam it in there, because you assume it's impossible for an answer to be found using the scientific method. You pretend like you respect science, but all you actually respect are its conclusions from the past, not the process of science, which is what science actually is, and not its ability to find any answers to anything ever in the future. And so the reason I said maybe you should just stop talking about things discovered through science is that if science isn't capable of discovering things that are currently unknown in the future, why would you think it was capable of making discoveries in the past? If science as a method is not sufficient to find satisfactory answers to questions about how the world works, well, you can't just say that's true from now until the end of time. That's also true previous to now, right? So why do you acknowledge the findings of science in the past? It's a very odd double standard. I don't think atheists have a monopoly on science. I just think people who outright reject the possibility that science will find answers to big questions in the future are incredibly hypocritical when they accept its answers to the big questions of the past. That's nothing to do with atheism or religion.
Theists also believe in science, and we fully back scientists' innovations and contributions to society. We just feel that what you call the gaps are so big you could drive a truck through it, and we find the more we learn that there are more gaps than substance. There are more points on which we are still ignorant than the points that we know.
Yeah, exactly. There are things that have not been discovered scientifically yet. Therefore, they never will be. Therefore, I'll jam my God in there and pretend the job's done. And pretend that somehow that serves as evidence for the arbitrary explanation I just jammed in. If you thought the scientific method had the power to make discoveries about what's currently unknown, what you would say is, okay, these gaps, these are currently unknown. They're being worked on, and we'll see where that goes. And that would be the end of it. But because you don't respect the process of discovery that is science, right? Because you don't respect the fact that it's about taking what's currently unknown and gradually making it more known, you take those unknowns as an invitation to make up whatever the hell you want. So again, you might as well just say science is incapable of coming up with any explanations for anything, and say we have no idea about how the body works, and just make up whatever the hell explanation you want for that too. Why are you talking about scientific discoveries as if they're true? Galaxies, DNA, all this kind of stuff. Those are things that were unknown for the entirety of human history except the last tiny minuscule fraction. They were just as unknown then as the origin of the universe is now. And everybody who had some other idea about how those things worked or what those things were was dead fucking wrong, because they refused to wait for the actual answer or work on finding it themselves. Just like you're doing, because either they lived before the invention of the scientific method or they did not respect it. What was that I said about getting through this fast?
There's more that points to, more and more points to the existence of an intelligent creator.
Such as what? All you brought up in your arguments was, it's complex, I don't know how that happens, therefore intelligent design. That's not something pointing to an intelligent creator. That's just not having an answer and making one up.
So in this sense, science and religion work together because we're both trying to discover the unknown.
No. Science is trying. You've already decided you know the answer and it's settled. There's no trying there. Religion has been done trying for thousands of years. That's why science keeps blowing it out of the water on issue after issue, and why even the religious respect science's findings, even while denying the effectiveness of the method to fill gaps.
And I think that religion has gone a little deeper than science in that quest.
I'm just going to interpret that as a joke and move on.
But science could be maybe more honest, but there's many things about science that are very dishonest, and the way they behave towards people that have contradictory opinions has been horrible.
Who are you talking about? What specifically are you talking about? Are you talking about, like, creationists not getting accepted into evolution journals? Can I have an example so I know what you mean?
So they both have their flaws, but we're both trying to uncover the unknown, and you'll just have different names that you call it by.
So one of those things is trying to uncover the unknown about reality by looking at reality in extreme detail and letting reality be the guide to what reality is, to unbelievably impressive effect. And the other one is just a bunch of people shrugging their shoulders and going, that's complex, how could that happen, therefore God, therefore God, therefore God. These are not the same. Anyway, that's the first of these 4 videos dealt with. There is a bit more in this one, but it's kind of a false start on the my grandpa said so argument about the revelation at Mount Sinai, and we already covered that. He starts on that argument here, and then the video just cuts off like halfway through, and then he redoes it at the start of the next one, which we already covered, so moving on.
Hey everyone, it's Rabbi Shmuel Pollen. I just got through going through most of your comments. I hope I got to all of them. I tried to get to as many as I possibly could, and the most glaring thing that everybody pointed out is the obvious mistake that I made, and I stand corrected. I think it's proof number 10. I said that the growth of a baby violates conservation of mass and energy, that principle, and they pointed out that there is food, and it should have been really obvious to me.
So the reason that you said babies violate conservation of mass and thought that was a good argument, an irrefutable proof of God, is because you forgot there was food. You forgot that babies eat food. You were hell-bent on having a debate with me, and you're convinced that you would win. And you thought babies violate the law of conservation of mass because you forgot food. Can I suggest that maybe when those negotiations about the debate fell apart, you might have dodged a bullet?
But I just want to say that there's a lot of proofs of God that are on the internet, and I could have just used them and made them part of my video.
That probably would have been better if your arguments involve you forgetting things like food exists. Although you say that as though you didn't just take arguments off the internet. I caught you reading verbatim off Wikipedia and at least a couple other websites. And now that you've said this, I'm really curious how many arguments I would catch you taking off the internet if I checked all of them. But I'll leave that up to somebody else to do. The point is, I know you're not as original as you claim you are.
But I didn't. I tried to think things out on my own.
Sometimes.
And being human, when I think things out on my own, I make mistakes.
Such as assuming, as a critical point in your argument, that babies don't eat. I mean, come on, we've all made mistakes like that before. Haven't we? What's that? Oh yeah, right. No.
And I just challenge you to see if you could come up with 25 reasons that atheism is right using your own head.
Why are we setting a target of 25? Quantity of arguments for anything literally doesn't matter at all. Quality matters, not quantity. And, the fact is, I don't care if you believe there's no God or something. I'm just happy with your video being really good evidence of why nobody should take your position in particular seriously. Because clearly you got nothing. You got 25 of nothing. And that's all I really want. So I'm satisfied.
Not using anything that's already on the internet. Could you do that? That's a good question.
Could I come up with 25 arguments for atheism off the top of my head? Yeah, I think so. Would I? Well, no, because that's an incredibly stupid endeavor. Figuring out what's true is not just a process of coming up with lists of 25 of things. You don't win the truth if you come up with 25 paragraphs of text first.
I also want to point out that proof of God is everywhere, and it's even in this instance that what we're talking about with the baby, because the baby gets nutrients, but it turns into a heart a brain, a lung, a liver. Food wouldn't normally just translate into these complex organs that work so well, these like finely tuned machines. The fact that organs exist and the body exists the way that it does, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, so a repetition of every single other one of your arguments for intelligent design. It's complex. How'd that happen? Therefore God. That argument was arguments 1, 2, 5, arguably 8, 12, 13, 14, 17, 20, arguably 22, and 23. And now that you've replaced babies violate conservation of mass with babies are complex, therefore God, that means 12 of your arguments are really just repetitions of one lame argument. You didn't have 25 arguments, you had 14. And it gets way worse than that if instead of collapsing all the arguments that go, it's complex, therefore God, into one, we collapse all the, therefore God arguments into one. But I'll let you have your 14.
It's not normal for food to become that, for food to become a human.
That's incredibly normal. What's abnormal is if a human eats food and that doesn't happen.
The process of food becoming a human is quite miraculous. It's something that needs to be explained.
Quite miraculous is not the same statement as something that needs to be explained. I agree it needs to be explained. A great deal of it is explained. That's a whole thing in biology. Us finding something worthy of explaining does not make something miraculous. These are not synonymous in any way whatsoever.
It leads to the realization that there is an unknown.
Honestly, not really. There's a pretty extreme understanding of the chemistry and cellular activity and embryology and evolution and pretty much everything else at play here. Where's the unknown? What are you talking about? Normally, I can at least see the knowledge gap that you're trying to jam your miracles and gods into, but here, not really.
That we have to learn more about.
Learning more is good. That doesn't make it miraculous, and it doesn't mean God did it. And for that matter, it doesn't mean we know nothing, and it certainly does not mean we never will, which is kind of a precondition for there being any remotely justifiable reason to jam your God in as an explanation.
So I stand corrected, but there is another proof there to replace that 25th proof. I've just given it to you.
Yeah, it sucks too. It's just as bad as all the other ones. In the overall point, it's identical to a lot of the other ones. We don't understand something, therefore that's evidence that my God exists. No, lacking an understanding in any given situation does not mean that we should declare that we understand that what you believe is true. It means we should declare that we lack understanding. That's what lacking understanding means. It means you don't have the answer. That mere fact of not having an answer cannot be in itself evidence for any given answer. Ignorance is not evidence. Okay, that's video 2 done. What's next?
Hey everyone, it's Rabbi Shmuel Pollan, and this is not in any way a response to Logicked and his video. I'm done with that. I'm done with you.
Aw. You know, the funny thing is, all these videos are before our argument about the debate conditions. He was already done with me before I ever even got back to him about it.
In short, what happened was he made a video against my video, 25 Proofs That God Exists, Irrefutable, and the video he made was, in a way, mocking my video, and it wasn't really a refutation of the points that I made.
If you say so.
It was more like nitpicking on certain things that I've said.
Like the wrong ones?
That he didn't think were, accurate.
Right, so like the wrong ones. I was nitpicking inaccuracies, meaning pointing out that your entire video was inaccuracies.
But it had nothing to do with the real point that I was making. It was sort of like a running commentary and a criticism. And I said, if you are going to attack my video in that way, you have to back it up. I'm ready to debate you. Let's actually get into these issues and see who's right.
That's already what the videos are for, but okay.
And I offered to debate him. It's clear on his video. I'm right, the front of the comments right there.
Yeah, I didn't check those.
That I'm willing to debate him, and he didn't show up. He never contacted me. He never showed up to the debate. And when one person shows up to debate and the other person doesn't show up because he's scared to show up or doesn't think his arguments will hold up,
or you didn't contact him through his business email or Discord DMs or any way that he actually bothers to look at,
then the person who shows up automatically wins. So I won that debate. I won that exchange.
Yeah, that's what I meant in the last video about him crowing about his victory when I never replied to his comment. Can you imagine declaring yourself the winner of a debate because you never actually got it arranged? That takes a special kind of person. But see, that's what I meant when I said that in my email exchange I told him it seems like he just wants to feel good and he'll do any weird tactic to make himself feel that way. It's very odd behavior, very interesting psychological phenomenon happening here, clearly.
But now I want to move on from that and forget about these people, because they, to me, what I see is they're very illogical, and that is the topic of this video.
Oh, that's the topic of this video, called "Is Atheism Illogical?" That's surprising. That's good to know.
Is being an atheist an illogical position? And I submit to you that it is.
No way, really?
And to explain that, I just want to share a story of an atheist going to a rabbi and saying, "Why do you believe in God? I never saw any God. I don't see any God in my textbooks."
Yeah, I already don't believe you. I never saw a God. I don't see a God in my textbooks. Yeah, no, not buying it.
What is God? What do you believe in exactly?
Do you mean what do you believe about it, or do you mean why do you believe it? That word was a little muddled. Either way, I think that's a pretty reasonable question.
And the rabbi says, "Well, let me ask you a question. Do you know everything that exists?"
Nope.
And the man says, "No, I don't."
So far, so good.
He says, "Do you know half of everything that exists?" And the man says, "No, I don't."
Still so far, so good.
He said, "Well, God is in the other half that you don't know about."
Oh boy, dropped it at the finish line. Rabbi, how the fuck do you know? You don't know some stuff that's true about the universe, and therefore God's one of them. Where's the logical link there? There is none. That's just saying that's unknown, therefore I know it. No, you don't. And the fact that it's unknown is precisely why I don't believe it. If it's unknown, if it's stuff that humans have no idea about, then we don't know and we have no idea. So I'm not just going to randomly believe your idea. That's stupid. That's the dumbest possible thing that I could do. And again, you see what I mean? You're not trying to reach the truth. You've decided what the truth is. And even if you don't know if it's true, you don't give a shit. You're going to believe it because you don't know if it's true. Have fun, but I'm not going with you on this. That's absurd. And your story shows just how absurd it is. It lays that out as clear as day and you're not seeing it. You're using it to support what you're doing when really it makes what you're doing look completely ridiculous.
And this is really the situation with atheism. Their whole belief is the belief that something doesn't exist. An atheist is one that believes that God does not exist.
Look, I'm not going to say with absolute certainty that God doesn't exist. That's foolish too. But to me, when you have an idea for which most of your arguments are based on nothing but a shrug, which you admit is just based on not knowing stuff, as you just admitted with that story, when you claim to know the origin and ultimate nature of all of reality, and you have nothing of value to back it up, and yet you insist other people believe you, yeah, I'm tentatively gonna go with the conclusion that you probably don't know shit. That you probably just made it up. Yeah, because every indication coming from you shows me that you did. Or that you're just following something somebody else made up. Who made it up is not the point. The point is somebody made it up. Could I be wrong? Yeah. Do I think I'm likely to be wrong? No. Every one of these videos I watch that's supposed to convince me God exists convinces me more that theists are unbelievably full of shit.
Now, what kind of position is that to take? That something doesn't exist?
Well, it's the one you take about pretty much anything. There's somebody standing behind you right now. Behind your chair there, there's a person behind you. Now, you better not take the position that person doesn't exist. I mean, what kind of position would that be to take, based on every indication screaming in your face that I'm bullshitting you right now?
Like, if you say that Bigfoot doesn't exist, that's a silly position to take, because it could be hiding somewhere, and someone could come up with a picture of it one day, and that picture could be authenticated, and then there goes your whole philosophy.
No, my philosophy would be entirely intact. It would be my reasonable guess that Bigfoot probably is not real that would go out the window. And I would be fine with that. That happens to me sometimes, just like it happens to everyone sometimes. I think something's not true, I realize I misinterpreted the information, or maybe some new information comes to light, I change my mind. When I think something's likely not to be true, that doesn't mean I believe with absolute certainty that it's false. I just consider its falsehood to be the most plausible scenario. There may even be other options that I also consider consider at least plausible, like, for example, there being some sort of large, hairy, humanoid animal living out in the forest somewhere. That's not that implausible, really, but I consider it less plausible than that all of these inconsistent reports and blurry images and misinterpreted, highly compressed videos of people walking around in black clothes or skinny bears walking around on their hind legs are all the evidence there really seems to be, because the thing's a product of myth-making and wishful thinking and not the reality of the animal. I want to be correct as often as possible, and if it's pointed out to me where I'm incorrect, I will definitely change my mind, if I'm presented with a good reason to think I actually am incorrect, of course. But I'm quite comfortable taking the position that something doesn't exist. I do it all the time, and so do you. If you didn't, you wouldn't be able to go through your daily life, because you'd be constantly wondering if you're actually surrounded on all sides by every kind of object imaginable.
To say God doesn't exist, God could be hiding somewhere and one day show up, and then your entire philosophy falls apart.
Again, my entire philosophy wouldn't fall apart. I'd just change my mind on the God issue, like in 1 second. It's not a big deal. Call me when it happens, we'll talk.
It's a very weak, illogical position to take, to say, I don't believe in something and that's my philosophy.
That's not my philosophy. That's not a philosophy. That's just you telling me a thing and I'm like, no, I'm going to put that in the reasonably confident you're full of it pile. For now. How is that a philosophy?
So it is illogical to be an atheist. You cannot prove a negative.
Well, yeah, you can, of course. That's a fundamental part of logic, but I think what you mean is the more colloquial usage of it, where it means you can't prove that something doesn't exist. Like with the Bigfoot thing, it could always be hiding somewhere you didn't look. Maybe it exists in a way different from what you understood. Maybe it disappears through transdimensional portals into redwood trees and therefore can't be detected. And this is why when I say something doesn't exist, like when I say I think Bigfoot does not exist, if I have to, if it's not clear to the person I'm talking to, and if it's relevant, I'll point out that of course I don't mean that with absolute certainty. Of course I don't mean that's proven to like mathematical certainty. I just mean I think it's a reasonable position to take for the time being based on the information I have or the lack of expected evidence that I have, and I'll change my mind if and when it comes to that. But that I feel secure enough in that opinion to feel pretty confident that I won't have to. So of course I could be wrong that Bigfoot doesn't exist or God doesn't exist, and really it would only take one thing in either of those cases to change my mind. I don't necessarily know what that thing is, but if the time comes, I will. But similarly, I could also be mistaken that I'm making a video right now, that I'm wearing a top hat, that a top hat is a thing that exists at all. I could be mistaken that I have a body, that I'm breathing air. This could all be a simulation. I could be a brain in a vat being stimulated with electrical probes. I could be a disembodied spirit floating in some sort of an afterlife being fed memories of a life. I don't have absolute certainty about the affirmative claims I believe either. Also, by the way, I'm reasonably well convinced that all those possibilities I just mentioned are also not true. And again, that doesn't mean I consider that proven to a certainty.
You cannot prove ever that something doesn't exist, and as soon as a theist brings an argument that God does exist, you have to knock it down.
No, I don't. I can do whatever I want. You're coming to me trying to defend your position with an argument. I can do anything I want with that. I can just say, nah, no thanks. Not really interested right now, thanks. Or anything else I feel like doing. You're the one that wants to convince me. You want my time, you want my mind. It's your job to figure out a way to make it happen. It's not my job to facilitate it.
And if you knock that down, the theist can bring another argument, and another argument, another argument. And I brought 25 arguments, and they knocked down maybe one.
Please, I knocked down every single one of them so hard they'll never stand back up. But if I'd never bothered, and just not even watched your video, that wouldn't make you right. That would just mean you got ignored.
And then I replaced that one with another one. They have to knock down every single one of those proofs in a definite kind of way, in a complete way. They have completely dismantled and demolished the argument. Because if one argument gets past the goalie, if one argument is stated, is argued, and is not totally debunked, then the theist wins the debate.
But yeah, it's not about debates or winning, right? Like you said in your emails. It's just about discovering the truth and learning together as you relentlessly kick balls at the goalie's head until he just gives up and goes home because it's been 13 hours. And then you dance around screaming, I won! I won!
Because if there's points, like on a scoreboard, it's 1 against 0. The theist gets one argument through that is not fully debunked.
I like how everything about your entire conception of a debate is how you can rig it so you feel like you won. I mean, that was what came through in our email conversation too. Just you're desperate to feel like you won a debate. And your entire priority is not making the thing valuable or interesting or fun. It's just making it so you feel like you won. It's kind of sad.
And I don't think he really debunked any more than 24 of my arguments.
Okay, I'll take that deal. 24 it is.
Then they get through and the theist wins the debate. And that's the situation we have here.
Okay, Shmuel, if it makes you feel better.
And most of the responses that I've gotten from his comments from his people that follow him have been very, very illogical and using unfair tactics.
Unfair tactics? How could they? They should be using fair tactics, like yours. Really what they should do is just post so many atheist arguments that they found on the internet that they run out of characters in the YouTube comment, and then do that like 100 more times in a thread, and then tell you that if you don't debunk every single last one of them, you lost and atheism is obviously true. See, that's a fair tactic. I'm learning a lot about debates from you.
Using illogical tactics like just calling my arguments names like clueless and...
That's about the babies violating conservation of mass, isn't it? I mean, you didn't have a clue that food exists. If ever clueless was a valid description of an argument, I think that's it.
Haphazard and using names about my arguments instead of actually arguing with what I'm actually saying. So I think atheists are just basically BS artists because they know they can't prove that God doesn't exist. So they just have these fanciful ways of getting around the points that we're trying to make and saying, using straw man arguments, saying that because the atom is complex, therefore the God of the Bible exists.
Shmuel, even if I were to accept that the atom is complex, its complexity does not demonstrate the existence of any God. That's the point. It's not about whether it demonstrates the existence of the God of the Bible. It doesn't demonstrate the existence of any God at all. But you say it does. That's why you're using it as evidence for a God.
Always trying to paint us a picture that we believe in some superstitious, unrealistic God. The truth is the God that we believe in is reality. Period.
No, at best, the God that you believe in is what you think reality is like. You still have to show that reality is like the God that you believe in. If your belief is reality is like X and really reality is like Y, then saying our God is reality really means nothing if reality is not actually like your idea about it.
Reality is God. God is reality.
Your arguments for God are based on the premise that if God exists, life and variety and complexity and so forth should not arise naturally, but be intentionally created by an intelligent being. If that's not true about reality, it doesn't matter if you call your God reality. It's not actual reality. It's just reality as you perceive it in your imagination. If you want me to believe reality actually is the way you say it is, that is, being a God, you have to convince me of it. You can't just conflate the two terms together, tell me God is reality, and expect me to suddenly become a God believer. To believe in reality is to believe that something is. That's it. That is not equivalent to believing that all that is somehow contained within or originates from a thinking, willful, almighty entity. These are not the same. They're not even close.
If you believe in science, you must believe in God because God is reality.
Yeah, no. If it turns out that the fundamental nature of reality is some sort of intelligent being that intentionally created the universe and life and so on, then fine. Then God is reality. As of now, however, all that's apparent to me is that you're telling me, you're insisting to me, with zero compelling evidence, that reality is a God, that that's what reality is like, and you're insisting that I must believe that if I also accept that through observation and experiment you can learn things about the universe. And literally the only reason you've given me is because you said so. You suck. Do better.
I hope the time will come when God and his name will be one. When God and everything that he's done will all be one. Everyone will realize that science is God and God is science.
A method of learning through experimentation is God.
We will all come to know God, and he will spread the knowledge of God from starting right here and going out through the internet to the ends of the earth, and the earth will be flooded with the knowledge of God like water covers the seabed. May it happen immediately with the coming of the Messiah. Amen.
Congratulations, you hope that. Did you ever think about actually arguing for that instead of just insisting upon it? Did you ever think that maybe you should arm yourself with a little bit more than just assertions and presumptions and I don't knows? Apparently not, so I guess I'll say everything you said is noted and then the note went in the garbage can. Last video.
I'm Shmuel Pollen, and since I've been dealing with you atheists for a couple of weeks now.
You atheists. Ugh.
And you take over the comment section of my videos. I'm just going to give you my brutally honest opinion of what I think of you, how I find you.
Yeah, you do that. I'm going to hold my tongue in return. I'm not going to be brutally honest about what I think of you. I'll be as honest as I need to be, but you don't want the brutally honest truth.
I find you to be very close-minded, angry, hateful, mean.
Yeah, right back at you.
Following science textbooks like and atheist leaders like you're in a cult.
How many times have you brought up what the Bible says or what a rabbi says as evidence? You don't have a lot of room to talk here.
I find you to be shallow, sad, pathetic. I find that deep arguments go right over your head.
Yeah, another thing on which you don't have a lot of room to talk.
I find that your attention to nuance is very weak, and I prefer that you prefer to play gotcha and display your knowledge of science rather than actually debating the major issues which have been debated for thousands of years.
Speaking knowledgeably about science when discussing scientific questions is a gotcha? Well, then what the fuck is saying that if you come up with a heap of hundreds of arguments for your position, and some person addresses all of them but one, then you're automatically right? Is that not a stupid-ass gotcha tactic? Is that the prime example of honesty and good faith in a debate? Come on.
You could get involved in that debate, but you choose to just say, I know science better.
If the debate is on questions of science, like for example, the origin of organs in humans, to use your replacement baby argument, then how is knowledge of science on that topic not extremely relevant?
You are name callers. You like to call arguments names, like clueless.
You've brought that name up twice. That's the only example of a name that somebody's called your argument that you've brought up. You seem like you're just upset that one person called your argument clueless. Frankly, though, having one of your arguments called clueless is not really a major consequence for you having made a video where one of your arguments was based on you forgetting that food exists. I'm not going to let that rest, you know. That's not just a simple mistake. There's no way I'm just going to forget that happened.
Instead of actually dealing with the argument itself, you call people names as well, which is extremely immature.
What are you doing right now?
And deep down, I think you all know that there is a God.
I'm sure you're right that deep down you think that.
I know that you know that there is a prime mover. There has to be.
I disagree. There are a number of ideas about the universe that require nothing even similar to the concept of a prime mover, and until we have some reason to decide which one's the correct one, no opinion. And of course, a prime mover, which just means anything that made the universe start, doesn't have to be a god. Your arguments don't get you to where you think they get you.
But you don't want the responsibility to listen to what he has to say.
If somebody believed that your prime mover argument was valid and sound in every way, and actually showed the requirement for a prime mover, and for some reason they also believed that prime mover had to be a god, that still doesn't get them anywhere close to believing that God has something to say to them, that they have a responsibility to listen to. You make so many arguments that at best, if they were correct, if they were accepted completely, would only get you to a sort of vague approximation of a factual understanding of the origin of the universe, and nothing else. None of this responsibility to listen to what the prime mover has to say to you stuff. That's another thing you have to actually argue for, successfully. But instead you treat it as part of the same claim, which it's not. You don't seem to understand the very basics of thinking. Like, for example, how to distinguish obviously distinct ideas from each other, and how to figure out which claims an argument supports and which ones it doesn't even address. You know, I'm not going to toot my own horn. I'm not a champion debater, but as far as debates go, you in particular are not on my level. I would flatten you. I guess it's a good thing for you that you intentionally fucked up the negotiations.
You'd rather sin and make sure that no one is watching and attack anyone who says that someone is watching.
I'd rather sin and make sure that no one's watching and attack anyone who says someone is. You mean God, right? The person watching? So I believe there's a God, and yet I think that if I pretend there's not one, then that makes sure that there isn't one who's watching, and therefore I can sin without being observed, despite the fact that I still believe in the God that's watching, and my pretense didn't change that. Okay, you're assigning some incredibly strange and contradictory psychological behaviors to me, which sound completely alien. I don't think you're really on the right track there.
Being religious is hard, and you don't want that responsibility.
What, of waking up every day and having to convince yourself to keep believing this trash? Yeah, I guess not. Seems kind of pointless, especially considering all I would appear to accomplish by doing it is making myself understand the universe less.
So you really need to think about that and see if you maybe want to repent a little bit and take a better path. It's actually more logical if you think about it.
I've listened to these arguments for several hundred videos in a row, and it seems less logical every single time. I think really what you mean is it seems more logical if I think about it the way you think about it, but the problem is the way you're thinking is not logical, so I'm not gonna.
More wholesome and will make you happier, even though it's a lot of work.
Okay, I care about what's true, not what you say is wholesome and happy. I mean, hell, even if it would make me happier, which I don't buy, I'm not going to believe things for no good reason just because I feel like it. I care about the truth. Everything in service to truth. If the truth is unwholesome and unhappy, well, so be it. At least it's true.
All good things require a lot of work, and religion makes you happy, and it requires a lot of work.
I'm really curious about this a lot of work thing. What is the a lot of work you're referring to? I mean, for me, it would take a hell of a lot of work to make myself believe what you're saying, because I'm so utterly unconvinced by what you say. Is that what the work is, or is it more like rituals and things, or what is it? I mean, at least if I converted to Judaism, I could take Saturdays off.
So for those of you who want to ask questions about theism and Judaism, please keep commenting.
Even if they're hard, probing questions designed to cut to the heart of your ideology and see if it's actually based on fact? Or do you just mean softballs where you get to preach in response?
But for those of you who just are on the attack and trying to take me down a notch, you will not take me down any notches.
Oh, come on. Let's find a middle-of-the-road solution here. 2 notches. That's an okay compromise, right?
Because I have no respect for your style of debate. I have no respect for your intelligence, the way you're using it against me.
Fine, respect is not necessary. I don't want your respect, I want better arguments from you.
It means nothing to me what you say.
I know, I've noticed that all the arguments made to you fall on very deaf ears, or at best, uncomprehending ones.
So you can stop. And those of you who want to ask questions, I'm happy to deal with them. I'm happy to answer them.
I've been asking questions all the way through all of my videos, and I've yet to receive a satisfactory answer to anything.
So please consider a little bit of repenting. Maybe I am willing to put aside my urges a little bit to make room for the prime mover, to make room for the idea that I have responsibility to a higher power.
I got plenty of room for the idea. What I don't have is evidence for the idea. And you didn't even give me any in your entire original video. None of your arguments addressed that. None of your arguments tried to make that point. Do you want to try now? I'm not just going to believe you for no reason whatsoever. You got to put in at least some sort of effort. Come on. If you want me to believe your religion or repent and acknowledge that I have responsibility to a higher power, convince me. But the problem is, you got nothing, and so you can't.
Consider that. And consider stopping attacking people on the internet so that we can make the internet a place that can be habitable, a place that we all can live in comfortably and happily.
You're the one who started arguing on the internet. You made that choice. If you want to stop arguing on the internet, just stop. I don't know what you want.
And may we find common ground with each other, because there is a lot of common ground.
What's the common ground? I mean, there might be common ground on things like preferences for society, things like that. There's probably some degree of common ground there. But in terms of all of these claims in particular and how we approach those, I don't think there's much at all.
So let's discuss that. And together, may we, through our cooperation and through the harmony that we create, bring about final redemption immediately. God bless.
I'm not going to cooperate with you on bringing about final redemption when you've given me no reason to think such a thing is a thing. There's a lot of things you've demanded, I believe, recently that you put zero effort into justifying, but that one doesn't seem to be even slightly linked to anything that came up. Why are you inviting me to participate in this? You know that's not going to happen. Anyway, I guess that's all for now on this. I really hope this doesn't end up as long as the Almando saga, but you never know. But for now, thank you all for watching. If you would be so kind, please do give the video a like and click subscribe if you haven't. If you really like the channel, I hope you'll consider supporting with even like a couple bucks a month. It helps a huge amount. And to all of my supporters, the people who've already made that choice, thank you so much. If you want early access, sign up to the email list at list.logicked.com. Also, join the Discord, and I'll see you next time.